How did a German motorcycle go from being a weird gamble to conquering the whole world? The BMW GS didn't just change the way we travel, it changed the way we understand motorcycles. From the Dakar Rally to the most extreme journeys on the planet, this machine proved there are no limits when you have the right tool. But where did it all begin? Today, I'm going to tell you the story of the BMW GS, the motorcycle that turned adventure into a way of life. To understand the BMW GS, you have to go back to the late 1970s. At that time, BMW had a very clear identity in the motorcycle world. They were touring machines, comfortable, solid, extremely well built, but also pretty conservative. These bikes were designed to rack up miles on the highway, not to leave the pavement. There was no adventure, no off-roading, no excitement beyond the road. BMW was synonymous with reliability, but not with fun or exploration. But while BMW kept going down that path, the world was starting to change. By the late 70s, motorcycles weren't just used for travel, they were starting to be associated with something bigger, the idea of adventure. And a big part of that was thanks to an event that was quickly growing in popularity, the Dakar Rally. The Dakar wasn't a normal race. It was brutal. Deserts, dunes, thousands of kilometers, extreme conditions. And most importantly, it showed something that captured everyone's imagination. Big bikes crossing the world without limits. Suddenly, motorcyclists started wanting something different. They no longer just wanted to travel on the road. They wanted to be able to leave the pavement, explore trails, get lost, and find their way back. They wanted a bike that wouldn't hold them back. And that's where the problem comes in. Because at that time, the market was completely divided. You either had road bikes, comfortable but useless off the pavement, or you had enduro bikes, light but uncomfortable for long-distance travel. There was no real middle ground. There was a huge gap. A bike that nobody was building. A bike that could do both things without too many compromises. And that's where BMW did something that would change everything. While everyone else saw two separate worlds, BMW saw an opportunity. A bike that could travel but also explore. A bike that wasn't the best at anything but could do it all. In 1980, the BMW R80 GS was born. And even though nobody knew it at the time, this was going to change the world of motorcycles forever. It wasn't a loud launch, it wasn't a media revolution, but it was one of the most important ideas in the history of motorcycling. Because what BMW was proposing was something completely new. The GS concept comes from the German Geländestraße, which literally means off-road street. And that wasn't just marketing. It was the central idea behind the bike. To create a machine capable of doing both things without fully committing to either one. The R80 Gs broke that old logic of either a touring bike or an enduro. It was a mix that, in theory, didn't make sense. But in practice, it worked. On a technical level, the R80 GS, it also brought some very interesting solutions. It was powered by an 800cc boxer engine, a classic and iconic BMW setup, highly regarded for its exceptional durability, low center of gravity, and smooth torque delivery. It wasn't a high-strung engine, but it was extremely usable, ideal for both the highway and rough terrain. It also featured long travel suspension, something essential for off-road use. This allowed it to absorb bumps, move easily on dirt roads, and offer a much more versatile experience than any traditional touring bike. But perhaps one of the most revolutionary features was its rear single-sided swing-arm transmission system, the monolever. A solution that simplified the structure, reduced weight, and improved overall performance. Later on, it would later evolve into the Telelever system, but right from the start, BMW was setting itself apart in engineering. And speaking of weight, for what it was, the R80 Gs had a relatively moderate weight, which was key for it to perform well off-road. It wasn't a lightweight enduro, but it wasn't a heavy touring bike either. It was right in the middle. And that balance was its greatest strength. But beyond the technical side, what really made an impact was how it looked. It was tall. It was weird. It was different from anything else out there. It didn't look like a sport bike or a touring bike or a pure off-road bike. It was a strange mix that raised questions. And that's why, at first, nobody was completely sure if it was gonna work. A bike that does everything but doesn't really stand out at anything? It sounded risky. But that's exactly where the genius was. Because BMW wasn't trying to make the best bike in a segment, they were creating an entirely new segment. And then the unthinkable happened. The idea, which many thought was weird, even unnecessary, started to show its true potential on the most extreme stage possible, the Dakar Rally. Because it's one thing to say that the BMW R80 GS could do it all, and a whole different thing to prove it, in one of the toughest competitions on the planet. Thousands of kilometers, extreme heat, sand, rocks, mechanical failures, physical exhaustion. The Dakar doesn't forgive, and if a bike isn't up to the challenge, it simply doesn't finish. But BMW didn't just take part. They started winning, and that changed everything, the world's perception. Suddenly, that tall, odd-looking, and seemingly unspecialized bike was outperforming much more focused machines. Not because it was the most powerful or the lightest, but because it had something more important: balance, durability, and real capability on any terrain. The GS proved it didn't need to be extreme in just one area, because it was good enough in all of them. It could cross deserts, endure endless days, and keep running when others started to break down. And in a race like the Dakar, that's what makes a difference, and that's where the real turning point happened. What once seemed like a risky idea became a benchmark. What seemed like a bike with no clear identity ended up dominating the toughest stage in the world. Suddenly, the GS not only worked, it was the best at something no one else had figured out. Because it wasn't about being the fastest on a specific terrain, it was about being the most capable on all of them, and in that, the GS had no rival. In 1987, the BMW R100 GS arrived, and with it, BMW did something crucial. They didn't reinvent the GS, they perfected it. After the success of the R80 Gs and its crowning achievement at the Dakar, the brand understood exactly what made this bike special. And they decided to enhance each of those aspects without losing its essence. The first major change was the increase in engine displacement. The Boxer engine now went up to 1,000 cubic centimeters, offering more power and, above all, more torque. This made it much more capable on the road, especially for long trips or when carrying a load. But what's interesting is that BMW didn't turn the GS into an aggressive bike. It still had that smooth, progressive, and controllable power delivery that made it so usable in any situation. Another key point was the improvement in the suspension. More travel, better absorption, and a more stable ride, both on pavement and off-road. The R100 GS felt more solid, more planted, and better prepared to tackle tough terrain, without losing comfort on the highway. It was a clear evolution toward a more complete motorcycle, but if there's one feature that truly defined this generation, it was the introduction of the Telelever system. This system improved the behavior of the shaft drive. It reduced unwanted reactions during acceleration, and it offered a much more stable ride, especially off-road. It was an advanced technical solution that raised the GS's level even higher compared to its competitors. And all of this came along with an overall improvement in ergonomics and comfort. The R100 GS was more comfortable for long trips, more rider-friendly, and more refined in its operation. It didn't lose its adventurous spirit, but now it was also an excellent travel companion. And that's the key to this evolution. It wasn't a completely new motorcycle. It wasn't a revolution. It was something much smarter. More power, more technology, more capability, but without losing what made it special. More GS. In 1994, the R1100 GS arrived, and with it, BMW didn't just evolve. The GS once again changed the game completely. Up until that point, the GS had already proven that its concept worked. But with the R1100 GS, it stopped being just an interesting idea and became a global benchmark. The most important change was the addition of electronic fuel injection, replacing the carburetors. This improved efficiency, engine response, and reliability in different conditions, especially at high altitudes or in extreme climates. It was a more precise, more modern bike, and better suited for real-world use anywhere in the world. On top of that, it had something that wasn't common on many bikes at the time: ABS. A system that greatly improved braking safety, especially on tricky surfaces. This marked a clear shift in philosophy. The GS was no longer just a capable bike. Now it was also a safer bike. But if there's one innovation that defined the R1100 GS, it was the Telelever system in the front suspension. A completely different design from traditional forks, which separated the suspension and braking functions, reduced dive when braking, and improved stability. It was strange, different, but it worked incredibly well. And like many things on the GS, it raised doubts at first until people tried it. Plus, the Boxer engine grew to 1,085 cubic centimeters, offering more power and a fuller character throughout the entire rev range. This made the bike much more capable on long trips, especially when loaded or with a passenger. It was no longer just a versatile bike. It was a bike designed to cross continents, and all of this came with a major shift in perception. Because up until that point, the GS was still seen as something odd, a strange mix. A bike for a select few, but with the R1100 GS, that changed. Now, it was a complete, technological, and capable bike, and most importantly, respected all over the world. It was no longer just an experimental idea, it was the standard. In 1999, the R1150 GS was launched. It wasn't just a technical evolution of the series. It was the bike that brought the GS to the whole world, because even though it was already respected within the motorcycle community, it was still missing something crucial, becoming a cultural phenomenon. And that happened in 2004 with the documentary series Long Way Round. Two actors, Ewan McGregor and Charlie Boorman, decided to do something completely crazy, cross the world on motorcycles. And they chose to do it on the GS. It wasn't an advertising campaign. It wasn't traditional marketing, it was real. Thousands of kilometers crossing Europe, Asia, Russia, Mongolia. Extreme conditions, non-existent roads, real problems. And throughout that whole journey, the GS was there. Falling down, getting back up, braking just enough, but always moving forward. And that changed everything, because for the first time, millions of people saw what a GS could really do in real life. Not on a spec sheet, not on a magazine review, but in a genuine adventure. Suddenly, the GS stopped being just a motorcycle. It became a symbol. The symbol of traveling without limits. The symbol of real adventure. The symbol of, I'm going and I'll see how far I get. And that's when everything blows up. Sales go up. The fame grows. The GS becomes an object of desire. Because people no longer just wanted a powerful motorcycle. They wanted a bike that would let them live that experience. And the R1150 GS, especially in its adventure version, represented exactly that. A machine capable of crossing the world, adapting to any terrain, and accompanying you on journeys that once seemed impossible. It wasn't the fastest, it wasn't the most innovative, but it was the one that showed up at the right moment, the perfect time to show the world what a GS really was. And from that moment on, everyone wanted one. In 2004, the R1200 GS was launched, marking the moment when the GS stopped being just a great bike and became the absolute benchmark in the market. If the R1150 GS made it famous, the R1200 GS made it dominant. Since its launch in 2004, BMW took everything it had learned over decades and took it to another level. The most obvious change was the weight. The R1200 GS was lighter than its predecessor, which was key to improving handling both on and off the road. This made it more agile, easier to control, and much more accessible to a wide range of riders. Mechanically, there was also a major leap forward. The boxer engine increased to 1,170 cubic centimeters, delivering more power and better response across the entire range. It wasn't just faster, it was more usable. You could travel, overtake, climb hills, or carry luggage without feeling like the bike was at its limit. It was a real improvement in the user experience. But where the R1200 GS really made a difference was in technology. BMW started to integrate systems that, at the time, were practically exclusive, like traction control and riding modes, more advanced electronic suspension, and ABS. And suddenly, the GS wasn't just versatile, it was smart too. It adapted to the terrain, riding style, and conditions, something no other bike in the segment offered with that level of sophistication. And that had an immediate effect on the market. The GS was no longer just an option, it was the option. Sales skyrocketed. Competitors started copying the concept, and all the brands realized something. If you wanted to compete in the adventure world, you had to go up against the GS, and that was not easy because the R1200 GS managed to do something really tough, combine power, technology, comfort, and off-road capability all in one package. It wasn't the best in every single aspect, but it was the best overall, and that's the key to its dominance. It didn't win by being extreme, it won by being complete. For more than a decade, the R1200 GS was the best-selling motorcycle in many European markets and one of the most influential in the world. It didn't just lead the segment, it defined it. Because from that moment on, whenever someone said adventure bike, what they really meant was a GS. Today, the BMW GS reflects how motorcycling has changed over the past few decades. What started as a simple idea, a bike that could handle both pavement and dirt, has now become an advanced technological platform. The modern GS is no longer just a versatile motorcycle. It's a smart machine. With the arrival of the R1250 GS, BMW introduced one of its most important advancements: the ShiftCam system. It adjusts the valve timing according to the engine speed. What does this mean in practice? An engine that can be smooth and gentle at low RPMs, but powerful and aggressive when you need it. It's the evolution of the GS concept. Adapt to everything. On top of that, there's a huge amount of electronics, multiple riding modes, rain, off-road, dynamic, advanced traction control, cornering ABS, cruise control, digital displays with connectivity. The bike doesn't just respond anymore, it interprets what you're doing. When it comes to suspension, the evolution is just as impressive. Systems like Dynamic ESA automatically adjust the stiffness based on the terrain, the load, and your riding style. It's a bike that adapts in real time, without the rider having to touch a thing. But all of this reaches its peak with the R1300 GS. This generation represents the biggest leap in years. It's more compact, more powerful, lighter, and even more high-tech. BMW redesigned the chassis, improved the ergonomics, and optimized the whole package to make it even more effective in any situation. And this is where the big question comes in, because if you look at the R1300 GS, it has everything. Power, technology, comfort, off-road capability, in so many ways. It's the final result of more than 40 years of evolution. But it's also something very different from the original GS. More complex, more electronic, more sophisticated. The BMW GS did something that very few motorcycles in history have achieved. It didn't adapt to a segment. It created one. Before the GS, the world was divided. You either had road bikes or you had off-road bikes. There was no real middle ground. The idea of a bike that could do it all without fully compromising just didn't exist. And after the GS, everything changed. Suddenly, a new category appeared. A tall, comfortable bike, capable of traveling thousands of miles and at the same time hitting the dirt without fear. A bike designed for the real world, for adventure, for exploration. And the most impressive thing is that the entire market ended up copying that idea. Today, every brand has its own GS. Honda with the Africa Twin, Yamaha with the Tenere, KTM with the Adventure, but they all start from the same foundation, the original idea, the one that was born in 1980. And that's where you really see its true impact. Because the GS didn't just win in sales, it won through influence. It changed the way people understood motorcycles. It changed what people expected. It was no longer just about speed or power. Now it was about freedom, versatility, and the ability to go anywhere. And that's why the conclusion is simple but powerful. The BMW GS wasn't the fastest, it wasn't the most powerful, it wasn't the most extreme, but it did something much more important. It changed the game. Because in the end, it didn't just create a motorcycle, it created an idea. The idea that a motorcycle doesn't have to limit you. The idea that you can travel without a destination. The idea that the road could be any road. It didn't create a machine, it created a way to travel. And if you want to learn about the Africa, go ahead and click on this video.